This is Anna speaking from the World Future Council. And we are still waiting for one speaker to arrive, but maybe I can already give a small introduction. So first of all, welcome everyone, and I'm happy to facilitate the World Future Council's first webinar on the relationship between 100% renewable energy and SDG implementation, and why 100% RE is leaving no one behind and is possibly the biggest catalyst for sustainable development for everybody. The webinar will be recorded, and if you have registered on our Google form, you will receive the slides and the recording as a follow-up. If you have any comments or questions, please type them into the chat box, and we will come back to it latest during the discussion round, which hopefully will be very active. We also have a range of very excellent speakers for today, but before I will introduce them, maybe I can call your attention to a quick poll, which I would like you to fill out. It shouldn't take too long, but it will give us a fundament for our discussions later on. Okay, I will leave the poll running a bit longer for everybody who joined a bit later now. I just started a poll, which will be good for our discussions later. And I would really appreciate it if we can have a very lively discussion. So ultimately, I would not aim for having a typical Q&A, but really to have like a panel discussion with all of us present here. And in the meantime, I will also start the stream, which I hope you can see. Okay, so this is for our webinar today. And so I will quickly introduce our speakers. First of all, we have Rian van Staden, the platform coordinator of the global 100% RE platform, who will talk about the 100% RE vision. Then followed by Joachim Fünfgeld, advisor climate energy from Pledge for the World, on the relationship between renewable energy and SDGs and the whole process behind it. Then we will have some hands-on experiences from several countries, from national and local developments, and how the transition actually in real life already benefits SDG implementation. First of all will be Chang Yamasum, Executive Director of the Coastal Development Partnership in Bangladesh. Then followed by Sixbert Mwanga, Director of Climate Energy Network Tanzania. And lastly, Christine Nettersheim, who is joining us from Cleanwork and is Junior Advisor for Climate Policy, who are working on 100% RE in the Seychelles, together with the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate Change. We will then have the discussion and see what the poll shows us. So maybe we can already start with Rian. Are you good to go?
Pretty much.
Very good. The floor is yours.
Right. Thank you very much. A quick question. Am I running the presentation or are you? Just wanted to make sure. Okay, we'll find out. So, thank you very much for the opportunity. Indeed, it's a unique opportunity, not only in the sense that it's the first webinar from our colleagues at the World Future Council, but perhaps more importantly because it is such a key topic, and I'm hoping I will have some time to have some exciting discussions about that today. The platform, the Global 100% Renewable Energy Platform, has at its core the goal to convince everybody that everybody needs a 100% renewable energy goal as soon as possible. That all the other things that we do need to fit into that context because 100% renewable energy is our end goal. Now, 100% target, of course, sounds harsh or hard or difficult. We're very used to the political targets that we see on a day-to-day basis of 50% by 2050 or 20% by 2020 or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, in most cases, this has a lot to do with political wishful thinking rather than hard science and the sort of due diligence that is necessary. And that is why so many cities, most cities, national governments and so on, see these intermediary targets flashing by without ever achieving very many of them. What we're saying is that everybody should have a 100% target that's set realistically, that can be adjusted as required, and everything else fits into that context. It should serve as a roadmap of how we want to get to our end target of 100% renewables, as a yardstick by which we measure our progress, as a catalyst to make things happen and get things moving, and as a driver to push us harder, as hard as is necessary for us to achieve realistic goals in a realistic time frame. Anna? And 100% target, maybe back one, if you don't mind. Thanks. No, nope, we're still going forward, I'm afraid. If you'd like, Anna, I'm happy to run it from here as well with a shared screen. Might be easier for both of us.
I am afraid my laptop wouldn't handle that.
Okay.
The internet connection isn't the best, sorry.
No, that's fine. We'll do it the best way we can. So it is important to understand that 100% renewable energy target is really possible for everybody. And a realistic target as well. It's not just something that the rich North can enjoy. It's not just something for those who already have infrastructure, or perhaps specifically something for those that do not. Renewable energy can provide energy where it doesn't exist, and it can fix energy where it does exist. And it does cover everything. When we say 100% renewable energy targets, we do mean everything. So that's where we're heading. Next. I guess what we're saying as an organization and as a group of renewable energy organizations active worldwide to everybody is basically that it's better to define the transition to a clean, safe, and sustainable energy regime in a way that is transparent and clear and makes it and communicates it to everybody than trying to do it basically through a large number of unrelated efforts. Of course, it should be dynamic. Things need to be adjusted. But the thing we need to strive for is to move that date forward as much as we can in terms of achieving 100% renewables. This is what the platform advocates. This is what we're working with partners in all sectors, government and industry and organizations to achieve. And it certainly is something that increasing we are finding a great deal of openness and interest in. Next. Now, you're going to be hearing a lot of very specific and detailed information regarding the relationship between 100% renewable energy and its goals and so on, and sustainable development from other speakers. But I would like to take this opportunity of just touching on a few overarching elements and trying to give us a bit of a framework on which we can hang some of the ideas that will be presented and some of the discussions that we'll be having. It came as a real eye-opener for some. I've been in the renewable energy field for a very long time, and I guess, like most people, I academically understood that what we're doing in renewable energy addresses the needs of the people at many levels, but that there is such a close fit between renewable energy, 100% renewable energy, and the goals we set there, and what we set with sustainable development, specifically the sustainable development goals, came as a revelation to me to a large extent, and I think does often to many other people as well. The degree of shared goals between the two, often considered to be separate and dissimilar things, is quite extraordinary. The synergies between them are often quite unique. They are based on the demands of the one and the product, the results of the other, very closely coupled. It is when you think about it, when you understand the need to think about it, and then take a moment, as I did, to think about it, it strikes one immediately as an incredibly intuitive match. The Sustainable Development Goals plot a path to a better environment and a better humanity, and in a very real sense, 100% RE as a goal delivers on many of those goals. Next. But having said that, and this is the reason I'm so keen on this discussion today, and I'm so very grateful that you've taken the time to be on board for this. Even as it was not something that was in the foreground for me, for a lot of other people who are smarter, more influential, and more powerful than I am, this is not something that they've seen. This is not a connection that springs out at a person necessarily. We need to work hard to make sure that people understand the linkage between these two domains and the benefits of ensuring that these work in tandem. We still need, I think, to expend a certain degree of effort to understand the dynamics involved. These are two enormously complicated domains of action, of human activity. And they are very, very supportive, but we have to fine-tune our understanding, I think, also to be able to really make the best use of the revenue streams, of the leveraging that we can do, of the benefits that we can acquire. And I think in this discussion that we'll have today, you'll run across quite a few of those dynamics and will help to clarify that understanding. But we also need to formalize the link between the two. I don't think one will find many a document around where these two ideas or concepts are tied together formally in a political or in any other sense. Once we've done these things, it's possible for us to clarify the message, and then we will truly leave no one behind. Next. In terms of awareness, I have to admit that in the renewable energy community, solving the Sustainable Development Goals is not always in the foreground or even thought of for that matter. We have not been as generous in our understanding of the role that we play within the framework of the SDGs as we ought to have been or should be. And there's a lot of awareness work that needs to be done in that area. There's certainly not a lot of clarity amongst the sustainable development community that 100% renewable energy is necessarily even a thing, because it is an environment of incremental improvement. There's not a lot of shared exploration and vision. Next, we need to fix that. We need to get a clear understanding of the dynamics. I won't belabor this, but this is where the science and the coordinated cooperation on data and analysis comes in. There's a lot that we can do, and we have to work and discuss in discussions like what we're having today, how we're going to sort this out, how we're going to understand, create a better understanding of the dynamics, how best we can leverage the advantages. Next. And then the formalisms. I think this is something that we can really look at, even though it's maybe a little ways off still, to really state that actively pursuing a 100% renewable energy goal should literally be a required aspect of any contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, because without that, effort is always going to be harder and trickier and less clear than it needs to be. But at the same time, we need to tie 100% renewable energy goal into every national SDG program, because the two are so complementary. So these two sides need to formally acknowledge the roles that they play in each other's universe. And we need to really also formally ensure that every 100% renewable energy target, whether it's at whatever level, references the SDGs and takes the sustainable development priorities into account. In that way, those of us in the renewable energy sector will remember why we do some of the things we do. Next. So that's what this discussion for me makes this discussion so exciting. That we have this understanding of 100% renewables, that we want to go there. We have this understanding of this potential enormous synergy between sustainable development and 100% renewables. And that's what we're here to explore. And I want to do it with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rian. I totally agree with you, and this is very important indeed. So again, thanks everybody for taking the time to join us today. And I think we should go straight up to the next speaker, and afterwards we could have 1 or 2 questions. So next up is Joachim Fünfgeld from Bread for the World. Joachim, are you good to go? Joachim, can you hear me? You are still muted. I actually think we just lost Joachim, which is very unfortunate. I'm sure he will be back in a second. Or Joachim? Yeah, that's Joachim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I cannot unmute.
We can hear you now. It's
Hello?
not very well, but we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Joachim. Can you hear me?
You can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think your microphone isn't working very well. I think your microphone isn't working well.
Hello? Now you can hear me? Okay. Okay. Maybe I. Okay. So just. Okay. So just tell if it's good enough, then I continue. If not, I. Okay. So shall I try it with the phone?
No, it was actually better, but if you want to join via phone, that's fine with me. Okay, so then we will have to change a bit, but that's okay. So we will first go, sorry about that. We will first go to Mazum, who is with us from Bangladesh. So it's pretty late for him. So thanks, Mazum, for joining us. Are you good to go to explain a bit of the developments on 100% RE and how it can benefit sustainable development goals in Bangladesh?
Okay, thank you, Anna. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
First of all, thank you for organizing this here. And I think if we have to speak what's before me, it would be helpful for others too, or I don't have to explain a lot. But of course, this renewable energy is not a new issue for Bangladesh context, because Bangladesh is kind of a champion in solar home systems for quite a long time. But Bangladesh government policy directions and recent development interventions does not encourage renewable energy development in Bangladesh. This is very like a sorry situation for us. So we try to raise the awareness within the civil society, people, and the government that why Bangladesh should really commit for 100% renewable energy. Okay, first of all, our government, their mindset for energy security is really driven by the coal-based approach. So, in one hand, we have abundant solar energy. Bangladesh is blessed with 300 days for solar energy, and also like around 4 kilowatt hour per day on average. So there is a big potential. But why government is not really taking this renewable energy seriously? We found that there is kind of a misconception or kind of a thinking about the land needs for the renewable energy in Bangladesh context. Because you know Bangladesh is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, and we don't have much land. In fact, our 48% area is kind of water bodies. So this is a kind of a area where we see a source, or there is no like technical reviews or scientific documents that okay, the renewable energy does not need too much lands. At the same time, when many organizations who are doing this renewable energy, especially in the form of solar home system, they are also, in my personal opinion, not properly calculating the technology to harness the needed energy for the household. For example, like they're counting 1 kilowatt for 100 square feet or 120 square feet, like this kind of system or rules of thumb. But in reality, it's like not more than 18 or 20% solar energy can be really converted for this electricity purpose. So, in a sense, the poor people are deprived of the required energy because the market or the organizations who are working on that, they are not really focusing these issues. At the same time, also, many innovations are going on all around the world that Bangladesh really could learn from. Right, for example, India or Australia, they are using even water bodies for generating renewable energy, especially the solar. So far in Bangladesh, we don't really have that kind of mindset. Here I would like to emphasize that in Bangladesh, energy poverty is still higher than the income poverty. For example, 48% is income poverty, but 54% is the energy poverty. So when you look energy poverty dimension, then you can feel that it has a direct link to the SDG, because poverty is just not the economic poverty. It's also the food security and food insecurity issues, health security issues. So in that context, the renewable energy and that can really contribute in all these sectors. For example, 100% renewable energy can transform the rural lighting scenario, and that can also enhance, like giving them option for using this room heater or even fan or cooler, so that their health can be really improved, or they can maintain a sound health and they can do their livelihoods. So this is a kind of synergy basically is not explored, not only in Bangladesh, in my view, most of the developing countries. So one challenge for us is how we can really show the interlinkages of this 100% renewable energy in other dimensions as well. At the same time, there is also needed policy support. In my view, many people are talking that renewable energy sector there should not be subsidied. But if you look at the global energy context, even nuclear power plants, fossil fuels, all are enjoying subsidies, even till today. But the renewable energy sector does not have that opportunity. In fact, in Bangladesh, we have a very bad situation that government recently imposed new tax on the solar panels and other equipment that are imported from the outside the country. So that means in future, the renewable energy projects or that is currently being built or will be built will have a cost increment. So that might not encourage other entrepreneurs to really invest in this sector. So and no one of the civil society is really talking on these issues, because they always put a kind of renewable energy in a kind of a single energy secure access issues. Of course, renewable energy will provide us time for 100% access to clean and affordable energy for the households, because our prime concern for SDC is that no household left behind for clean and affordable energy access. And in other contexts also, the renewable energy is, I think, the only option to ensure that, especially the remote island areas or off-grid areas, that no people is leaving behind in their access to energy. So many of the issues that is interconnected is not yet properly highlighted. So I think we have still have to learn more and also need a lot of research. For Bangladesh context, I could say the literature exists very limited on this overall 100% renewable energy approach. Rather, they're focusing on particular either solar or in particular technology-driven approach. Because I believe sustainable development goals is basically is a paradigm shift, because our past model of development was fueled by or is still fueled by the fossil fuel. So to address the climate action and others, we have to really shift that paradigm. And to shift that paradigm, you need a new fuel source, new energy source, and here comes the renewable energy technology. Maybe 10 years ago, nobody would be dare to say 100% renewable energy. But nowadays, the cost has decreased even for solar panels like 80%. And many other innovations are coming out every day. So we now have a belief that it is possible to make 100% renewable energy success, not only in Bangladesh, but also everywhere in the world. And to that, we really have to have a more evidence, more good practices so that we can convince the policymakers that why they should really invest or why they should adopt these renewable energy technologies to ensure that everybody has access to clean and affordable energy. And I would also like to emphasize that the mistake that in the past energy security or policy approach is pushed by the fossil fuel that really drives the climate change. We should not follow the old way. Rather, we should follow this renewable 100% renewable energy approach so that our future generations they are not negatively impacted by our current energy policy choices. Now, our previous generation, we are facing the burden of their decisions of driving the fossil fuel. So I think this intergenerational equity, climate justice, and also as energy as a human right issue, all should really look in an integrated way, not isolated way. And energy as the core engine of development. So you have to choose your energy source very wisely because you cannot really drastically shift the whole energy system in a day. It takes 30 to 40 years to build up an energy system. So for renewable energy, we should really start from now. Then maybe within the 30 years, the system will be built and we can have a hope that we can reduce the Paris Climate Agreement goals temperature well below 2 degrees centigrade. And to do so, it is not just Bangladesh government or others. The whole global leaders has to really play a big role. And that's why we see a platform of 100% renewable energy could be a driving vehicle. Maybe still the renewable energy advocates are quite not very active, but I think time has come up to step up or maybe accelerate our advocacy and lobbying so that we can ensure that our next generations are not suffering these polluting energy sources that we have been. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mazum, and I wholly agree. I mean, this is also what the World Future Council stands for, the voice of future generations. And I think we should really make sure that future generations do not have to suffer the same burdens as we do. And I think we can all agree that especially the solar home system in Bangladesh has been very, very interesting and is one of its kind in the whole world, and many countries can take some lessons from it. So maybe Joachim informed me that he's now back on his phone, so maybe we can take him forward and then we can go back to the national examples. Joachim?
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly well.
Okay. Sorry for this. Sometimes, these technical things happen. Sorry for this. Joachim is my name. I work for Bread for the World, German development organization. And I wanted to highlight a bit what we have been working on with the World Future Council in the last few years a lot, this link between 100% RE and the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And I want to highlight a bit what we wrote in our report that we published last year. You can see a picture of it. And you can find the download on the World Future Council website or ours. And what we do in it basically is showing how 100% RE is linked with all the SDGs and how 100% RE can be a tool really to achieve every single one of them. Not only the energy one, not only the climate one, but really every single one of them. And why did we do this? Basically, in all our political work around energy and climate change, we kind of found that the narrative around sustainable development, around justice, around really how to build a just future for our societies is politically stronger than the climate change narrative. When you look at Germany, where I am from, like the debate around the Energiewende focuses mostly on jobs or energy prices, also on justice issues now in coal regions, and not at all really around climate change, but that's even more so and can be more so seen in the global south. So when we discuss energy transition in the global south, we usually discuss energy access, we discuss innovation, trade balances, health issues, gender justice. In other words, we always discuss a subset of the SDGs. So what we wanted to do here is to collect arguments, examples, and data about how 100% RE can contribute to the achievement of all SDGs in order to be politically stronger in the discussions around energy in the national context. And so this is at the end intended to help our partners and all of you to create a positive vision around 100% RE. Rian also talked about this positive vision, and we are pretty much convinced that such a vision is needed. A positive narrative is needed to bring about political change also. And such a narrative is also needed to show that alternative exists, that everybody can benefit from the alternatives and no one is ultimately left behind. And what we are also convinced of, that's why I talk on political discussions here, is that the implementation of 100% RE depends mostly on political will. Like most or many technical issues are solved now. It's really a political issue, a political will issue. And as I said, with a positive narrative, a positive vision, we try to strengthen this political will. And we work with partners in Tanzania on this. Sixbert will talk about our work there in a minute. So next slide, please. Anna? Okay, perfect. So here you see a picture, like basically a summary of some links between 100% renewable energy and the SDGs. Some might be obvious, like for SDG 1, no poverty, that through renewable energy, access to energy can be provided at the lowest possible cost. So through access to energy, the goal of eradicating poverty can be reached, or at least it can be a step towards it. Or if you look at SDG 3, health, outdoor air pollution will be reduced, indoor air pollution will be reduced, which is a huge issue, especially regarding cooking. And energy can also be provided in rural areas to health posts who have no access to energy as well. So that situation can be improved as well. For education, some of the arguments are obvious. This picture of students having light in dark hours, being able to study in late hours is one argument, but also giving kids more time for studying, since they have to use less time for collecting firewood, for example, or even getting teachers to teach in rural areas, because can be an issue there. We often hear that it's difficult to have teachers in rural areas who don't want to move there because they wouldn't have access to electricity there. For gender, some of the points are obvious. One is that women are mostly exposed to indoor air pollution through cooking, which could be improved. Women are the ones who usually have to collect firewood for cooking, a situation that could be improved. And also the labor market for renewables could be created in a way that it's more open for women than the one we see so far. So the study goes much more in depth than what I can do in 5 minutes here now. Another one I wanted to highlight, though, is SDG 17 when it comes to partnerships and new forms of collaboration. We see that, 100% RE goal is more than just producing energy with solar panels and windmills and new technologies. It's basically a new form of thinking about energy. It's about sector coupling. and thus will create new forms of cooperation within societies, and also new forms of cooperation transregionally and transnationally. So even there, when it comes to such partnerships, the 100% RE goal can have a major impact. You find more examples, more data, more illustrations, and more literature to each of the SDGs in the report. And just to having said it, what we do here, or what you can read in the report, are mostly the positive examples, and we know that just switching to renewable energy will not be sufficient in a way. You can use renewable energy also in a non-sustainable way. That's obvious. So it needs political will behind it, and we as civil society, of course, have to support it in a way that has more positive impact. So next slide, please. That brings me to the political section. We derived some policy recommendations from it. You can find it in depth in there as well. One has been set by Rian already, setting 100% RE targets and embed this target across policy area is a key one. One that I want to highlight is ensuring adequate civil society participation and capacity building. In our work on the issue, we found that multi-stakeholder participation and a lot of discussions with all parts of society is really critical here to get ownership at the local level, at the national level, and to really show everybody and all parts of society what the benefits from 100% renewable energy can be. The whole transformation to 100% RE will be so wide and so in depth that we really need support from all parts of society, and civil society actors, civil society networks can be really crucial and key actors there to create that. So that's a really critical point, using a bottom-up approach to this rather than a top-down one. And that is also like the last point here, strengthen change agents and pioneers. We, of course, need positive examples and pioneers moving ahead so that others have an example and have more faith in that. And Sixbird from Tanzania might talk more about our work in that. And with that, I think I'll leave it for now, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Joachim. That was really excellent. And I really hope that we can go a bit more in depth into some of these recommendations and links later in the discussion. But for the sake of time, I guess we should go straight to Sixbird from Tanzania, from the Climate Action Network Tanzania. Sixbird, are you okay to go?
Yeah, thank you so much. Next. So maybe this is all about the size of the country, but of more important for me is on the population, of which we have around 54 million. And of that population, 75 of the whole population is living in the rural areas. And most of these people are also poor, and they are really reliant on the natural resources, and most of their activities is farming and keeping cattle. And one thing which is really surprising me is how the World Bank has been ranking the country and saying the economy is relatively stable and with its only growth 6 to 7% per year. Next. Yeah, so maybe back again. Yeah, so on the current situation, as you can see, is only around 80% of the whole population of the people have no modern energy, and they really depend on the wood fuel for cooking and heating, and of which is really disturbing that most of the institutions, also including the government and the private institutions, are depending on wood fuel for heating and cooking, I say. But this has come up with a very serious threat to forest. As of now, the deforestation rate stands above 400 1,000 hectares per year. And this has really, it has a very serious connection with vicious cycle of poverty, especially among rural communities who depend on the natural resources. Next. So in the end, those are the pictures shown there, meaning what does poverty look like in this country. And the guy you see seated on the stool and the other colleagues putting his hands on their pockets. These are the Swahili words, but the one seated on the stool was begging for the other one touching his pocket. And the answer was, but look at what you are sitting, you are like sitting on the best stool and then you are begging. And then why? So the question was like, all resources we're having, and for me, this is really linked to the potential of renewable sources available in this country, and see such high percentage of people have no modern energy, especially electricity. Next. And also you see we have energy at family and in total, and then there is a question of energy poverty, and the energy poverty, that's what I mean, using kerosene, something of that kind, and cooking using the 3 stones, which is really bad to the health, as Joachim has mentioned earlier. Next. So, but how now energy, 100% renewable energy could be linked to sustainable development goals? I just wanted to take you back to the Millennium Development Goals. And it was in that sense that Tanzania decided to select just 2 millennium goals out of 8. So they went to health and education. There was no connection with electricity or energy by then, but the challenge was that the advancement in the health and education sector, as Joachim has also mentioned, came up with or left so many crises and poverty tenacity, to the extent that some of the health centers or dispensaries which were built in the schools were not connected to electricity and no solar, no whatever. It was a crisis because doctors didn't want, or the young doctors didn't want to go to these dispensaries or whatever. And also, as you can also imagine, some of these health centers or dispensaries, they also need some electricity for refrigerations, and also to sometimes keeping some of the medics which needs lower temperature. So there was no that, and some of these medicine were stored in whatever, and they came up with a serious crisis. So many people died, but died in the context of the Millennium Development Goal. That's the same with education, where most of the schools were built at ward level or village levels, and the teachers the youth or the young teachers didn't want to go to the rural areas. And it was super expensive to shift teachers from elder teachers from the urban areas to rural areas, because they wanted to be compensated a lot of money. And then the government decided to live as it was. And then most of the people who graduated did not have enough education. And as of now, we have so many youth in the market who cannot be employed because they did not get teachers and they had no books and something of that kind. So the big question was running to the quantity of health and education centers, but there was no connection being connected to electricity. Maybe if they had connection to, let's say, using solar, some of the students could use time evening or night time to study on their own, or download the material, charge their phones and something of that kind, but it was not possible. And I think for us, that's why we think this should not repeat itself, especially with the Sustainable Development Goals. Next. So I just wanted also to bring your attention to the priorities Tanzania has selected, has come up with around 9, I think, priorities, ending poverty, which is really related or connected to poverty, to energy access, and in this regard, renewable energy, agriculture, health, education, gender equality, water, energy itself, infrastructure, and a global partnership. I think the still challenge is how the ministries, agents, and the local government authorities are really incorporating SDGs and these plans into their local context. However, some of the NGOs, including my organization, are already working with these local government authorities to see how we can really domesticate or customize SDGs into local government authorities. And of course, we are doing this, and we decided to do this as an entry point or a very important issue to go to renewable energy, because we see it really connecting all these selected priorities. I mean, SDGs priorities or goals. Yeah. Next. And with that in question now, we as a civil society or at national level, that's what we are doing. And the solar panel, you can see, we started with ourselves, and with the solar panel, you see this with what we decided to put on our office, as we were receiving a lot of critiques from the government when we were pushing for more 100% renewable energy. They were asking the same question, like, but you are not doing it. Can you show us the example? We decided to go 100% renewable energy in our office. But then the other picture you see with the two children is just the solar which was put on their rooftop, and then they are really trying to enjoy the lights. Next, and this is in the rural areas. And also, as another initiative, we thought we should bring everyone. The other one, that was a meeting where we organized with the Bread for the World and the World Future Council on really to see how we can debate and see how renewable energy is really linked to the national vision and the national strategies, and of more important, how it can be also replicated at or customized at local government level. And the other one with some people with some papers, those are the certificates. We thought that the role of media could be very much important. And then in that regard, we had to train some of the media from the region, including Kenya, Uganda, and most are from Tanzania, on how they can report and really influence the right on the role of renewable energy into the national development, and in this regard, SDGs. Next. And then back again, as we start to go to local level, these are the people we are talking with, and they really talking with them how renewable energy could contribute to their day-to-day activities. And so this includes the pastoralists. You can see these women are Maasai pastoralists. And the other one, these are the fisher folks with their boats, and they were really explaining to some of our staff researchers on how renewable energy could help them before we go to the local government authority. Next. So after that discussion, the previous pictures with the Maasai farmers and the fisher folks, this is, then we started discussing with the local government authorities, and these are the people where we brought in the ministries, the civil society, and of more important, the national Met department, to really see what could be the role of renewable energy and how that could be mainstreamed into the local government authority. Next. And also we went beyond by really bringing in the youth and see how the youth could also contribute into realization of renewable energy, and really also link up with the SDGs in their areas and how we can work together on realizing that. Yeah. I think that is the last. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sixbert. And it's really interesting to see what you're already doing in Tanzania and what can be done. Especially for me, it was very nice to see what the World Bank thinks about development, pretty much defining it as the typical economic growth, which we will get back to later. And maybe just to roll that up before getting back to the poll, which you hopefully all answered. We can go to the Greenberg, to Christine, who will tell us a bit more about how the link between 100% renewable energy and SDGs plays out in the Seychelles.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Then we get started. So the Greenberg is an advisory firm for climate and sustainable energy policy. And we are working with the Seychelles Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate Change since 2016 to support them on their path to 100% RE. And we support them on strategic development, mobilizing financial support, and also getting all relevant stakeholders on board. And we are convinced that the concept of 100% RE is perfectly suited for SIDS, small island developing states, and does not only bring benefits in terms of climate action, but also on other SDGs, as I will show later on. So I will show a bit the context of the Seychelles and then go right into their current efforts on becoming 100% renewable and how this is linked with the SDGs. Next slide, please. So the Seychelles are an island state. They consist of 115 islands, and most of the population is concentrated on 3 of them. It's the red ones, Mahe, Pralin, and Ladik. And the electricity system is basically split between the 3 of them. So the majority of the system is in Mahe, with 77 megawatt capacity, and the other part is in Pralin, which is also serving Ladik. And the electricity generation is 98% based on diesel generators, which are fueled with light and heavy fuel oil, and only 2% renewable energy sources have been employed so far. So they have a share of solar and wind power in the electricity mix, but as I said, it's very low at the moment. Next slide, please. So in making their decision on how to transform their energy system, Seychelles face basically 3 factors. On one hand, climate change is at the heart of the agenda because SIDS are highly affected by the adverse effects of climate change. So Seychelles are also dealing with temperature rise, sea level rise, and have also had natural disasters in the past who are having a great impact. And they want to show also themselves that they're active on climate change management in adaptation as well as in mitigation. And the second factor is tourism. It's a small economy which is highly dependent on tourists. It's as much as 32% of the GDP, which is related to tourism, and it's also going to be the most important sector for the next 25 to 50 years. So out of the perspective of businesses and also people employed in the sector, it's important that there's energy security, and at the same time there's also a rise in energy demand expected, which is also related to growth in tourism. And the third factor is that it's a fuel-based energy generation. So as I said, the share is 98%, and this involves a huge fuel import burden on the country, which is 5 to 10% of the GDP, depending on the oil price. So this is a relevant factor because, for example, the switching to renewables would make clearly the Seychelles independent from this import burden. Next slide, please. So how far have the Seychelles progressed? In 2016, the Cabinet of Ministers adopted a proposal by the ministry, which basically kicked off the development of a 100% renewable energy roadmap. And one of the first outcomes was a preliminary feasibility study, which looked into the potential in Seychelles. And there's, for example, a scenario for the biggest island of Mahe, which includes solar PV, as you see on the graphic on the right-hand side, wind energy, biomass, and also a storage solution, a pump storage in this case. And it shows that it's possible to ensure secure and reliable energy supply with renewables. And this feasibility study also includes next slide, please. So what are the main challenges so far in basically progressing on this first start? So we can group them in four groups. The first one are political, institutional, and regulatory challenges, which include, for example, that there needs to be a necessary energy policy and administrative framework guiding the development. And also incentive schemes are important to also include other actors in financing the transition. The second group refers to, for example, that there are high upfront costs for renewable energy. And for example, the Seychelles, they have currently a public debt situation they're still working on. They faced a public debt crisis in 2008, and their economy is performing well, but they still have plans to further reduce this public debt. And another point is that there is a lack of skilled and qualified workforce in the local market. So there's also expertise missing. Then the social side is important. As we have seen with the earlier examples, awareness and creating acceptance for renewable energies is also really important in making the transition possible. And lastly, technological barriers. There's limited experience with integrating renewable sources into the grid, and also lack of information and data at the public utility on renewable pathways. Next slide, please. So keeping the barriers in mind, there are already some suggestions for instruments and planned measures, how to transform the energy sector. So at the very start is, of course, setting up a policy, a regulatory framework and incentive scheme, for example, a feed-in tariff. And also policy framework would then also create the enabling environment for bringing in some financial investors, for example, also domestic institutional investors. One idea is, for example, that the Seychelles Pension Fund is participating in the energy transition. A broad local participation should be enabled. So the public needs to be involved in a way also to make the development transparent. And also to overcome technological challenges, the grid capacity needs to be improved, and also other issues concerning the grid. And the next, to overcome the skills challenge, it can also be connected to a training program. Like you can team up with local educational institutions to build up a specialized labor force to plan, construct, and operate the renewable energy sources or plants. And lastly, the sector, other sectors can be integrated. So in a long-term vision, you can also imagine that transport is going to be part of the transition by switching to e-mobility. Next slide. Transforming, taking the energy roadmap and putting into a graphic would look like the slide you see now. So on the vertical scale, you see the mitigation impact, so the reduced greenhouse gas emissions, which will of course increase over time. And on the horizontal scale, you see 3 different phases for transforming Seychelles towards 100% ERE. We're currently in the first phase, which is called preparation phase, which is lasting from now to 2022. These are indicative timeframes. And the majority of efforts is currently going into setting up the financing mechanism and the required institutional infrastructure. And on financing, for example, we are supporting the Seychelles on getting funding from the Green Climate Fund, which some of you might know. And the GCF could support some important kickoff elements for the roadmap. For example, capacity development or further feasibility studies to be undertaken. But there are many elements of the roadmap, and this is also why the financing part is a challenge to ensure that financing along all parts of the roadmap is secured. And the second part would be the actual installation of renewable energy lasting until 2030. And the last part would address the sectoral integration of transport. Next slide, please. So how can this be connected to sustainable development? I visualized the maybe most important SDGs which are addressed by this current status of the strategy. At the forefront, of course, is climate action. 90% of all domestic emissions in Seychelles are coming from the energy and transport sector. So implementing the roadmap would lead to an aggregated volume of 6 million saved CO2 emissions until 2035. And also the second goal, which is clearly addressed, is affordable and clean energy. We switch to clean sources of energy in a way that energy security is maintained, and also, of course, it should be affordable for the local citizens. Then decent work and economic growth. Seychelles will be relieved from the fuel import burden, and also it will create new employment opportunities. And another point is good health and well-being. This refers to reduced air pollution, which comes from the fuel-based generators. Then you could also say quality education is a crucial part because, as I mentioned before, skilled labor force is missing. So partnering with local educational institutions will also improve the human capital in the local market. And finally, gender equality is seen as a cross-cutting priority. So it should be reflected in all of the measures, for example, ensuring that if you are creating educational opportunities for working in the RE sector, that also a minimum participation rate of women is considered. And next slide. So if you're keen to get more details on this case, we published a policy brief. So you're invited to download also and get maybe more information, or if you're also coming from a small island developing state, how this might also be a beneficial case for your country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and very interesting to hear the vision for 100% renewable energy from a SIDS perspective, and very impressive what you are doing on the Seychelles. So maybe before actually going to the slide I just showed, I'm going to end the poll and we'll share the results with you. So maybe just to get back on the development question, most of you answered that to the question, how can we define development? All of the above, saying defined by the Human Development Index, the GNI, life expectancy and educational level, but also human progress and innovation. which I think is very interesting because a lot of organizations still define sustainable development or development in general more as economic growth. So I think there's really a big question there. How can we change this perception of development? Then the next question was, for which SDGs could you, in your opinion, 100% RE be the biggest catalyst? Obviously, most of you answered affordable clean energy. So maybe you even see it. And also climate action, followed by 2 votes for no poverty and good health and well-being. Interestingly enough, nobody answered zero hunger, decent work, or economic growth, which is very interesting. Also tying into the question about development and sustainable development. And with that, I would like to actually open up the floor for questions. If nobody has any questions yet, doesn't seem like it, then I would just take the question who got the most replies, which is how can we finance both the transition to 100% renewable energy and the implementation of the SDGs? So maybe someone has the answer to this, or at least wants to say something.
I'm happy to jump in if nobody else has something immediately pressing.
Thanks, Rian.
I think it's the key for me in a certain sense. I think that at the end of the day, it's easier to finance both than each separately. I think if we are able to get to a situation where we fully understand the dynamics between these two domains, where we know exactly how best to apply our resources, at the end of the day, achieving 100% renewable energy is likely to go an incredibly long way to achieving most of the system, not all, of course not all, but most of the sustainable development goals. And it may well prove to be the shortest path to some of these, because any intermediate steps that sees us, for example, applying new electrification or new energy provision services using non-renewable energy technologies, means that we have to, for the sake of the sustainability goals, we have to revisit that. And so we're spending money we don't have twice and 3 times. And that's why I'm so keen on this conversation, because really at the end of the day, if we can amalgamate in a very real sense the actions and the goals and the targets in these 2 areas, then I think we have a very good chance of financing both for less than it would have cost us to finance each individually. And that's really what I'm hoping for.
Yes, indeed. And I think maybe to add to this, it's very crucial that we somehow can finance it. And I think it's very important that we can unlock private but also public finance to do so. There are a lot of things still happening, and there are a lot of campaigns going on. Just to mention one, the Big Shift campaign, who actually tries to get the World Bank and other development finance institutions to shift away from financing fossil fuels towards renewable energy. So basically to divest and reinvest. Maybe somebody from the audience wants to come in. I would really be interested in hearing more from your side.
Otherwise, I can also maybe
Yes, please.
Raise another point. Being currently in the process of also acquiring finance for realizing 100% RE, shows you also that, for example, investment vehicles such as the GCF, which are rooted in the climate change community, also have sustainable development benefits on their agenda. So presenting a concept which does not consider also sustainable development benefits which can be defined as other SDGs, for example, is less likely to be successful, I'd say. So there's also a realization that there are cross-cutting issues, and at least I see this as an important point, that also in the financing area of climate change, also other sustainable development aspects are taken into consideration.
Thanks a lot, Christine. And I can see that Rian and Mazum definitely want to say something. And I think I also saw Joachim. So maybe Joachim first, if I'm not mistaken, you were the first one. Joachim?
Yes, no. Okay, okay. Those technical issues. Yeah, I just wanted to say I totally agree with Brian that combining this question, how to finance our renewable energy and the SDGs, should be thought together. That's way more efficient there. And I mean, when I discuss with my colleagues here at Bread for the World who work on ethical investment and the divestment movement and all that, who they talk a lot to ethical and environmental banks and environmental and ethical investors, and they always keep telling me, okay, the money is basically there. There are so many investors who want to invest in renewable energy, who want to invest in the global south also. And on the other side, I see that there are a lot of projects there, and there's a lot that the money could be used for. So somehow the gap is to link sort of money and projects. And I mean, barriers that we see on and on is one that the risks are often really overemphasized, and investors see too much risk basically when investing in the global south, especially, be it well, yeah, just leave it there. So, and that would mean if risk is overstated, we need really pioneer projects and really spread the news that it's worthwhile really to invest also in the global south in renewable energy. So the more pilot projects we have, and the more we spread this message, I think the easier it will become to link basically money with projects. That was my point.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Joachim. And maybe before I give my 2 cents, Masum, you also raised your hand. Masum, can you hear me? Okay, you are muted, so maybe until we've solved.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. My observation is that currently this renewable energy finance is too much focused on this climate finance or linked with climate finance. But in fact, it should be a development finance approach. For example, in Bangladesh, every year, I think 65,000 solar home systems are being built or installed. And here, the poor people is really investing a lot. So that means if people see there is a benefit and there is a policy option that will ease the burden of huge investment for this renewable energy and for their households, then it would be really helpful. That Bangladesh case has already shown. So what is missing is like the government, for example, the industrial sector should also have this investment for developing these technologies, and the public sector should really allocate fund for more research and development, especially in the southern context, because still the southern countries are depending on the northern countries for this technology support. So apart from the finance issues, this technology transfer is also a big issue, because a lot of this royalty or taxes and other issues acting as a barrier. So the financial mechanism really should be seen as a kind of a development finance issue, which will address a lot of trade issues, technological issues, and people's access to finance, especially for poor peoples. As the price is going down, and there is also an option that public spaces, they can really convert to these renewable systems. For example, in Bangladesh case, I would say the private public universities, they have many more spaces, so they can really build if they get the support from government or other agencies. And at the same time, for countries like Bangladesh, where you cannot really allow land for these solar installations, we can provide like some kind of easy installment to the land homeowner for this rooftop system. So all this means that the finance, there need to be innovation as well for financing this 100% renewable energy, incorporating transport sectors, incorporating even health sectors, because most of the areas existing opportunities where we can really have not much investment. At the same time, trying to understand that, for example, if you want to build a new kind of a land-based approach, where in the countries where land is limited, like Bangladesh, there you should really look for the existing institutions like roads or the beach sites, canals for installation of renewable energy technologies. So, this is where I think we have to really be more advocate, not only finance but also the technology transfer, kind of a very smooth way and at a cheaper cost to the developing South.
Sorry, I was on mute as well. So maybe just to tie up, we do have time for one more question. So Mark, what was your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers, and thanks for the discussion, very interesting. I just wanted to slip into the sort of communications discussion if we could. I think in the past, with regards to 100% renewable energy, we've tried, and I've worked with some people on the call, including Joachim and Anna, to try and compile sort of individual character portraits of people across diverse backgrounds, and pitching these as compilations to try and sort of humanize this very technical concept. And now we're, this call is about marrying 100% RE, very technical concept, to development, which is also something that, although is easily humanized, is also potentially a bit nebulous for certain audiences. And some of the kind of results we've had in the past have been mixed with our communications work around these issues. So I suppose the question for this group, and I'm sorry I'm coming with a question rather than a solution, is that basically, are there any plans in motion to do any sort of message testing or develop our thinking a bit more around the best ways to link these two concepts within key target audiences in certain countries? I know that Climate Outreach did a bit of work, I think about a year and a half ago in India, and I don't know if that's come to anything. I think that's maybe a question for Anna. I don't know what happened to that project, because they were supposed to deliver a toolkit that could potentially be useful for this kind of platform. Yeah, so basically, in a nutshell, my question is anybody working on any sort of message or communications testing around the links between 100% RE and development in any country or any sectors anywhere?
Thanks a lot, Mark. So maybe to answer one of your questions on climate outreach, I actually don't know what happened there either. I know that it was postponed quite some time and then I left CAN International. However, maybe Rian wants to come in on further work on 100% RE and SDGs. If not, I will.
It's actually a good question because communicating, as I indicated in my presentation, communicating the fact that these things are linked and that there are benefits to be had from looking at them in a sort of united fashion. These are things that require a certain degree of communicating, and we're also very interested in trying to find out how governments and industry and organizations and especially NGOs and so on react to this gradual breaking down of borders, if you will, between what in the past have been, I suppose, areas of activity, of areas of authority. So in that sense, we're very keen to do something like that. I have been looking around since having my eyes opened a bit by Anna on this topic, and frankly, I haven't found very much at all, unfortunately. So I think there's definitely space for something along those lines, and I certainly hope, and we're very open as a platform, of course, to engage in exactly that. Our members are exactly those NGOs that are active in the 100% renewable energy area, in various technologies and areas or various policy areas and so on. And so they are uniquely interested in understanding how they can extend a feeler into this new, in many cases, new space for them. So something like that would be very useful. I know if that answers that question. If I may briefly, just with 2 or 3 sentences, get back to the financing discussion that we had immediately before Mark's question. I just wanted to highlight that an important point was raised by Joachim, I think, that risk is a thing, and it's often oversold, especially in the global south. It's really interesting now as we find new perspectives, financing perspectives, project perspectives for renewable energy, how interesting and how sometimes very creative the financing options can become. So we're looking at situations now where we have some funders who look at renewable energy as something, as we've heard today, that addresses sustainable development. We have some who see it as a purely energy provision related activity, and some of it see it as an economic development activity, and some see it as other things as well. And the really interesting thing is that if you can facilitate a little bit of funding from one direction, you're very often able to leverage funding from other directions, including most often private industry, private investors, institutional or otherwise, who are able to see that investment, even though it's coming from a different direction in a particular activity, as a way of buying down the risk a little bit, so that it becomes more palatable for everybody. It becomes palatable for those investors in the sense that they see their risk more elegantly or correctly managed. And it becomes interesting for example, the public investor whose focus is on sustainable development to see their investment leveraged by the private sector. So it becomes very interesting. And the more of these angles that we can open up, the more we can prove and show that renewable energy answers a very, very wide set of questions, that 100% renewable energy ultimately and finally answers many of those questions. It becomes easier and easier to put together financing solutions of this nature. And we've been looking at the global south today. It's been really interesting. And we see a lot of opportunity for service-based type investment also from industry in these sorts of regions, if we can buy down the risk just sufficiently for them to say, yes, I'm comfortable with this investment. I know I'll get my money back. So very interesting how with each of these areas of approach or access that we're opening up, we are actually at the same time also addressing and perhaps solving the financing issue.
Thanks a lot, Rian. I know Joachim had one more thing. If you can tie it up in like 30 seconds, then that's fine. Otherwise, I'll tie up the meeting.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just briefly to respond to Mark. First, Mark, good to hear from you. And your question around messaging, I think the answer is not yet, but we are thinking also jointly with the World Future Council about breaking down what we did in general about the link 100% area and sustainable development to the country level, and look in several countries how this link can best be used. And I think for that exercise and for that work, it would be very helpful to look at communication issues there, because I think there they could be at the national level and at the local level, this can be very, very helpful. I think you cannot really answer that in general, because I think in different regions, different cultures, different communication methods will apply. But when we do that for the national level, it's definitely something we should look into. So thank you very much for this advice there.
Indeed. And with that, I would close the webinar. Everybody, thank you very much. And for those of you who are at who will be at the High Level Political Forum, we will hold an event at the Church Center of the United Nations on the 17th of July, together with Bread for the World, CAN Tanzania, and the Coastal Development Partnership, but also with the representatives from the government of Germany and Tanzania on this topic. And we hope to see some of you there. And otherwise, thank you very much again. And for those who signed up, I will forward you the slides and the recording in a couple of days. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.